Good afternoon. I hope it's afternoon when you hear this. My name is Barb Kaplan. I am speaking to you from Northeast Ohio, and I am by trade a retired school teacher who took up politics in sometime after the 2016 election. So I'm a very typical person and just got sucked in deeper and deeper as I watched with horror, the climate of American politics change and felt I had to do something. In the process of getting sucked into the political world, by late 2017 or early 2018, I found myself to be a forming member of an indivisible group called Crooked River Action. And you can email us if you like at crookedriveraction@gmail.com, or you can follow us on Twitter at C River with a capital R, Action with a capital A. So C River Action. We are, as I said, an indivisible group. We are also associated with Swing Left and a statewide organization called OPAL, Ohio Progressive Action Leaders. We find ourselves working with all kinds of groups, or at least rubbing elbows with them as we continue to do our political work. Certainly fair districts and fight to end gerrymandering played a very, very deep role in what we did, especially around the year of 2018. And now, of course, just trying to get the state legislature to do what the voters of Ohio voted for. We've worked with Moms Demand Action, Planned Parenthood. What we found overall is that single issues become overwhelming for an indivisible group. They tend to splinter us, and there's just too many fronts on which to fight. So we tend to focus mostly on voting rights and voter engagement in that regard. Certainly, if there is an issue that comes along that requires our attention, we will spend at least a little energy on that, or issue a call to action for our members to contact a legislator or send an email.
And how does your local group work with Indivisible and other allied and party organizations?
What we've found in our work is that Indivisible tends to be very nationally focused, and in a state that has trended redder, perhaps they don't get as deeply involved here, although they have been issuing tremendous financial support to groups like ours. And very recently, we were able to set up an Act Blue account through Indivisible, which kind of puts us under a sort of C4 umbrella. And that means that our ability to directly work with one particular candidate is a little more limited. We have to be careful that we don't cross certain lines. Swing Left is another group that we've worked with. And right now, since we don't know what our districts will look like, we do not know how involved Swing Left will actually be in the state of Ohio, or which districts they will target, since Swing Left really tries to work down ballot and find districts which are particularly flippable. So that brings us to OPAL, Ohio Progressive Action Leaders. As a statewide consortium, they have managed to provide us with access to Vote Builder or VAN, which is critical to doing our work. It allows us to get into a network of voters, identify the voters that really need to be contacted. They've also provided a tremendous amount of training on messaging and deciding how exactly we can best message and talk to voters in various and sundry ways. So that's kind of the overview of basically who we are and what we do. I will get a little more into that when I discuss the 2022 campaign.
So, what's the state of play in Ohio? What's it look like?
So what's the state of the state in Ohio? It's a flipping mess, to put it mildly. What we're seeing is we're just on hold. The Republicans, under the leadership of Senator Matt Huff and House Speaker Bob Cupp, have dug in their heels and done everything they possibly can to avoid presenting us with state district maps and congressional maps that follow the Constitution as the voters of Ohio determined they should be, following two votes, one in 2015 and the other in 2018. They are willing to play chicken with our Supreme Court. And so right now we are waiting for a decision from the court. Will they direct them to adopt the map that was proposed by the Democrats? Will they just accept the latest map that the Republicans put forth, which is still, it's better than what we have now, but it is still a highly rigged map and will make it hard for us to elect Democrats in the state house. So that's pretty much what we're waiting for. What we're seeing in advance of the primary is GOP candidates tracking extremely far right. The latest I've seen is a series of tweets from Frank LaRose, who always put himself out there to be, just the shining example of a moderate, talking about rampant voter fraud, even though at the same time, on the other side of his mouth, he admitted that there were like 27 cases of improper ballots in the last the 2020 election.
That bears repeating. LaRose said 27 cases of ballot misuse out of how many millions of votes, right?
So that's what we're looking at. I think DeWine is particularly scared to cross any of the extremists that are pushing, a very, very radical right agenda. So examples of that right now, the Ohio House has passed a permitless carry bill, which would allow anyone in the state of Ohio over the age of 18 to carry a concealed weapon without a license or without any training whatsoever. The police were against this bill. So much for the GOP backing the blue. They passed it. It is waiting for the governor's signature. And sadly, I think he will sign it. We had almost near record deaths from gun violence in this state last year. And I can only imagine what allowing anyone to carry a gun would mean to our safety. But that's where we are. We all, another extreme one, which who knows where it'll go. House Bill 327 is trying to silence educators, limit how they can speak on any variety of subjects. They were at first using the term that you can't teach divisive subjects. Well, what the heck isn't divisive, when you're talking about history? And now they've changed that wording a little bit. They've kind of muddied it, probably making it even more confusing. The underlying goal here probably is to undermine public education as we know it. The College Board has already said that states which have bills such as this one will have to eliminate advanced placement courses in our public high schools. So you can kind of see where this is going. Anyone with any funding will seek to put their child in a private school, and that's exactly what they want. So we expect a whole lot more ugliness. Those are just two examples. Should these legislators in Columbus lose seats, there will be all heck to pay by the time they're truly on lame duck status at the end of the year. So I personally expect a whole lot more ugly to come down the pipe before we're done.
And what can we do about this?
As to elections, we don't know. Since I'm speaking to Dems abroad, I would recommend that you do everything in your power to impress upon your Democrat friends over there that as soon as you get your ballot, turn around, fill it out, send it in. The window will be short. This is also part of the GOP play to just muddy everything. We don't know. There may be two primaries, one for the statewide offices and then a second one, God knows when, for just our district-wide races.
And that's just the primary or primaries, depending on what happens this week. But we've got the generals in November. What do you see happening there?
One thing, since I don't know if I'll ever speak to you again, when it comes to the general election, it is critical that you vote all the way down the ballot, especially to those Supreme Court races. We have 3 wonderful women running. We're in court on fair districts now because the one swing vote, a Republican by the name of Maureen O'Connor actually did vote with the Democrats in favor of fair maps. If we can get 2 out of these 3 ladies that are running for the Supreme Court elected, we will have a majority on the Supreme Court. The Republicans know that. So they passed a bill saying that Supreme Court races and other judgeships have to be identified by party. Previously, they were not. So they are hoping that that will help defeat us. So it's critically important. Their names are Jennifer Brunner, Marilyn Zayas, and Terry Jameson. So please, please, please vote for those people.
We've got another meeting in the late spring to highlight the court candidates and Secretary of State races. What else?
As far as the 2022 campaign is concerned, what the good news is the coordinated campaign already has boots on the ground here. We have spoken to their regional organizer. They are in the process of hiring more local district organizers who will be brought on board by May. Usually they don't show up until June, July, really August to really get in gear. That said, we as a smaller organization, we really don't know that the coordinated campaign in reality will act any differently than they have in the past. And what that means for us is they breeze in, they say they want to elect Democrats up and down the ballot, but then they just turn around and focus on the top of the ticket, mainly the senatorial race and the gubernatorial race. And anyone further down the ballot is left more to their own devices. In past cycles, we've seen them, say, hey, we'll ask, will you, as long as you're going out, will you deliver this candidate's literature? Oh, no, we're just told we have to do, Tim Ryan's race or whoever, the candidate happens to be. So we will see, but we're not optimistic that it will be any different.
It would be great if we could promote better coordination, the impact of resources. Where do we go from here?
So what Opal And what a group like ours, Crooked River Action, are probably going to focus most on is voter engagement. What we know is that we need to engage the new Biden voters from 2020 and what we call the flipped Biden voters, those who just couldn't stand Trump and might turn around and vote Republican again. So it's our job to try to do our best to tie whoever the candidate is right back to those extremist measures and be pointing out the impact that their votes and their actions have had in making this state just more extreme in ways that benefit no one. So, in terms of core issues that we'll probably be discussing, but who knows, with Ukraine, everything's up in the air. But corruption, making the ongoing debacle of House Bill 6, Larry Householder, the bailout of First Energy, and our ongoing funding of 2 coal plants that are actually operating in Indiana and just spilling their pollution over the border toward us. It's hard to make it translatable to individual voters. So probably just, the idea that your tax dollars are continuing to pay for a couple of coal plants, and that First Energy basically bribed elected officials to pass that bill are your best bets if you think that that's a winning issue where you are living. Inflation and the economy continue to play a role. An awful lot of our voters have not tied the fact that our economy is doing well to the efforts of Joe Biden. The perception continues to not meet the reality. And so that is a challenge we face. But we will see how the war changes people's perception. And with gas prices going higher over here, whether that is blamed on Biden or whether people actually understand the conditions that the world is under is something that we will need to translate greatly.
So that's the state overview. Do you have any additional thoughts on messaging?
With Opal, in terms of messaging, if you have not focused on the work of Anat Shenker-Osario, I strongly recommend that you do that. The book Merge Left is a wonderful book that talks a lot about this. I can look up and provide some links for Karen. I know she follows some of this in our newsletter. And basically, the race class narrative is working pretty well for us, although some Democratic groups don't think it is. So it's up for debate. But the idea is that when you talk specifically just about race, all the white people go, oh, you're not talking about us. Oh, okay. So you just want to help those guys. And then if you just talk about class, people of color are like, oh, well, you're leaving us out. But when you fuse the two together, the messages resonate across zip codes and across cultural groups. So we're finding that, a message that along the lines of no matter where you live or the color of your skin, everyone wants to provide their children with an education which will allow them to succeed in the future resonates with everybody. Identifying the villains next. And that doesn't mean that you call out every damn Republican there is, even though we probably should, but you say, but corrupt politicians in Columbus are working to undermine public education, to provide vouchers for the privileged few and divide us. If we work together, we can achieve a good public education system, which will provide every child with the opportunity to succeed to their greatest advantage. That last part is called stating your vision. And so that's how it works. Stating a value, identifying the villains, stating your vision. The problem with those speeches is some of them get really long. And one thing our group is working to do is somehow try to like encapsulate those in shorter little nutshells or pieces that people can bite off and chew if they're talking to someone at a door or they're sending out a tweet. And so that is one of the challenges of the race class narrative, but it's worth our effort. The other source I will recommend if you have time to do some reading is last month we did host David Pepper. You might remember he was the former chair of the Democratic Party. His book, Laboratories of Autocracy, is setting the activist world over here on fire. He is willing to speak to any group anywhere, and I suspect that he would do so for you as well. He would probably be really happy to do that. And his message is factual, reality-based, and also motivating. So we have found that really, really helpful. And his advice is that we work down ballot, and that is to lift up the top of the ticket. And that is probably what we will be doing here. We are working to develop a canvassing script to start knocking doors to let voters who did not vote in 2018 know that there is an important primary. And really, in conclusion, the primary is the time that you get to shape the Democratic Party. You get to decide whether Tim Ryan, who is your mainstream candidate and has tied himself very much to Sherrod Brown's message, is your man, whether it's Morgan Harper, who is trying to promote a very progressive image, but is not well known. And there is now a third candidate, Tracy Johnson, who honestly, I'm not sure how she's presenting herself, but she has a website. It's TRACI Johnson, and you can look her up as well. So with that, I will turn it back over to Karen.